And we are live with Joel Gerson and Mark Brunswick. Yes? Hey, what's going on? I guess we need to do some background stuff because no one in my audience, well, not no one, some people in my audience might not know who Joel Gerson is. So
some people in this room might not know.
So do your let's start with your why we're here. So first off, Joel is my jiu-jitsu coach as well as Mark. Mark's been training with Joel for how long now?
A long time. 13, 14 years.
13, 14 years at Rev MMA.
And he's still a blue belt.
And he's not a blue belt.
He's not a blue belt. He's not a blue belt.
Yeah, that's like the worst thing to be called if you're not a blue belt. To be called a blue.
Yeah, especially if you're a brown belt, which he is, and to be called a blue belt.
Yeah,
you got to give credit where credit's due.
So anyway, you've been an instructor for how many years now? Have you been instructing?
I've been doing jiu-jitsu in its different forms for 30 years.
But not for 30 years, but you started in judo.
Yeah, but the style of judo that we did was like the old style of judo, which was essentially jiu-jitsu. So there was a ton of ground fighting, there was self-defense. Jiu-jitsu's evolved. So the jiu-jitsu that you're seeing now, the sport jiu-jitsu, was like one branch of jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
But obviously what the Gracies did growing up was like more of a classic form. And that's close to the style that I grew up practicing. So there were times where we'd focus more on takedowns. And in terms of competition, back then there was no jiu-jitsu competitions in Canada. Okay. So you'd have to compete in judo. And we won a lot of fights on the ground just because of the style. But we still did a lot of the self-defense and the MMA, like the valetudo and stuff like that.
And for people who don't know, when you say judo or jiu-jitsu, when you're talking about judo competition, with regards to the groundwork, what are the rules with the competition? Like, how much time do you have actually on the ground?
It changes. It's changed over time.
Okay.
So it used to be that you'd have a lot of time, but then to make it more fan-friendly for the Olympics and the average spectator, they don't give you much time. And also to differentiate it from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because most people don't understand when they see groundwork what's going on. They understand a big takedown. So think of the Olympics in judo. A big takedown, everybody understands, like a knockout in judo. It's clear. But groundwork is very nuanced and it's this small motions.
So like as an observer, it would be...
They try and make it more popular so they eliminate the time on that people get to work on their ground.
And what do they have now in Olympic judo? Like,
I don't even follow Olympic judo.
So you don't even know?
I have nothing to do.
It seems to me like it's a throw contest.
I haven't looked at judo and it comes in passing in my Instagram feed, but there's too much Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to absorb that's what you have to immerse yourself in.
Okay, but with regards to the judo then, do you think that has changed the way it's been taught? Like, do you think that the popularity of judo as an Olympic sport has changed the way it's been taught, such that when you studied it, it was something different than when we studied? Like, for example, Taekwondo in my life, when I studied Taekwondo, it was Taekwondo, and now it's what it is, right?
Yeah, it's probably evolved for sure.
Yeah. Is there less groundwork in judo now because? Yeah. Okay, so it's a throw.
It's like anything, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. Over time, you have to specialize. As people start to get at higher levels of expertise, the level of differentiation and specialization, everything starts to get compartmentalized. So now, you only have so much time to get good at something. You have a finite amount of time. And as participation levels rise, you have to get better at that specific thing. So they need to focus on takedowns. The fight starts standing. They get good at standing, but they're good on the ground.
But that's their thing now.
Yeah, in the same way BJJ's focus, like they barely do takedowns in jiu-jitsu. It's the same kind of reverse formula.
Sure. Yeah. Now, with regards to BJJ, then, speaking on the same terms about sport jiu-jitsu that we talk about a lot, clearly that's changed the way jiu-jitsu's been taught.
Sure. And so even with jiu-jitsu now, you'll have different streams. So you have some jiu-jitsu academies that will focus primarily on the self-defense aspect, right? Like the Valente brothers or the Gracies. And then you have other academies that don't even teach that. That just focus on sport. That's all they care about is sport BJJ. Like the instructors don't even know the self-defense component. So then you have the other branches that will also mix, the MMA style in with the valetudo and the kind of like street self-defense. That they have instructors that actually know takedowns. So we got people specialize.
So when you're talking like in your club, which you have 2 now,
Yeah.
in the Greater Toronto area. Where are the one in
One's in Vaughan and one's in North York.
Vaughan and North York. RevMMA.com. Yeah, it's RevMMA.com.
Yeah.
So how do you approach it? Like, do you harken back to teaching this pure jiu-jitsu style, or do you run with the sport thing? And how easy or difficult is it to look at the trends and either go with them or stay away from them, like in your club? Like, how do you see your club as being run?
So I
Or
feel
actually, you can answer that too in a way, but
Well, I could. I mean, I think I've seen an evolution to it depends on who's in the class and who Joel's teaching to, because if he's conscious of the class that, hey, I know I have 4 people that are competing in this class, let's dial it back. 10 years ago, and, Joel's notorious for points.
yeah.
I don't give a shit about points. Get the finish. Oh, really? You got your 2 points? You got your 4 points? No. He went in there like an assassin. I want to end this fight. I'm going to end this fight violently, and impose my will on you. But there's a reality to of like, listen, you have white belts or blue belts at a competition. Like, he'll modify certain techniques and saying, okay, yeah, we could go for the finish here, but hey, let's go knee on belly. Let's take our points here. Let's take the back. Let's get your hooks in. So it really depends.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that when you have beginners that are coming into a jiu-jitsu academy, they're not thinking about the sport aspect. They're thinking about what happens if somebody grabs me in a headlock. That's the branch to get them if you want them in the longer term eventually to fall in love with the art and the sport aspect, which I think is more of a long-term goal for a jiu-jitsu practitioner. You have to bridge the gap from walking down the street to grappling. And that's typically the self-defense component, which I think is an important part. But also I feel like it's, and this is where I think the Gracies have it down well, where beginners come in and they're not free sparring. There's positional sparring, but they have to learn a foundation of self-defense moves. And I think most people are not body aware and self-aware in terms of their physicality to really jump into sport jiu-jitsu. They have to know what to do. And from this position, the guy grabs you like this, and a lot of times people still have to get in shape.
Which is my realm, I guess. And we'll get into that later, is the idea that everyone who's doing jiu-jitsu or judo or anything for that matter is doing it with their body. And this is something that people often, it seems obvious, but people don't appreciate what I'm saying. Like, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, he's doing jiu-jitsu with his meat wagon, right? So the mark meat wagon is what is about to apply the jiu-jitsu. So you can't separate that, which is I think what happens in a lot of clubs now, where you just have 100 people and you just start teaching. But the idea that you have to teach to your client based on their abilities.
Yeah, and I think as it pertains to what you do, and this is what I try and get through to my students, is how can you control someone else if you can't actually control yourself?
Brilliant.
So, for example, like last week I was teaching kids gymnastics. And I know some of the parents might be watching the class and they're going, well, this is not martial arts. But to me, it's everything. Because if you can't do a bridge and you can't do a handstand and you can't do these, if you can't control your body, your own self, I can't expect you to be able to control somebody else. And the same thing with adults. And I'll translate into adults and I'll say, listen, there's not a single black belt that can't do this gymnastics. They can all do this stuff to varying degrees of effectiveness. But I feel like on the journey to black belt, a lot of it is balancing the strength with the flexibility or the functional range, and really knowing your physical strengths and limitations and working on them over time. But if you look at a white belt coming in who's stiff, who might be overweight, who may be inflexible, they all have, like, if you look at like a chart, it's like up and down, different strengths and weaknesses, like a character in a video game. And the key is to get everything up. But I feel like jiu-jitsu is a vehicle to work on that. You know, like I have guys working towards their black belt now, and they all have things that they need to specifically work on. I have one guy who's physically not super strong, so he's doing strength training. I have another guy who needs to work on his range, so he's working on his range. And I feel like as you get deeper into the belt system, that stuff becomes more apparent in order for you to survive. You have to have a good level of self-awareness in terms of your strengths and limitations. And that's why I really think like the FRC stuff is great for that kind of stuff.
I was going to say that, as you know, my kids they started in Muay Thai Jiu Jitsu, and now they've transitioned into wrestling. And that's
So
something.
we've lost them?
Well, no, yeah, no. Well,
Oh, man.
they'll be returning. But
Oh,
I
no.
needed, I wanted to put them in because if I was going to say that, let's not take your club because I know your club runs very similar, but in a lot of clubs, what I think maybe jiu-jitsu has been lacking, and you have to correct me, of course, is the training of the skill. So it seems to me, and I've studied with you for a long time, but I've studied with other people all around the world, kind of, and it seems to me like a lot of clubs, it's like, come in, learn a technique, and let's all get to rolling. Whereas in wrestling, it seems like
Drilling.
it's drilling, right? It's like how many doubles have you shot? Wrestler has shot all of them. Like it's like we get into the class and they're like, you know, start running, and 20 shots and 20 sprawls and do it again and more push-ups and run and more push-ups and gymnastics and that kind of
And
stuff.
that's because I feel like wrestling is very competition oriented.
Yes.
And if you want to compete, you have to rep. And it was the same thing with judo. We would do uchikomi and nagekomi. You would I still do this with my classes, but more so with the kids. The adults, it depends on what we're focusing on. If you want to get good at a specific thing, your body has to rep it such that it becomes mechanized. And I explained to the kids, for example, like when you're doing the reps of a takedown, the same way with judo. I said, each rep has to look identical to the previous rep. Because your body has to be able to press a button or pull a trigger, and you have to be able to do it reflexively under stress. And the only way to do that, because takedowns are a big movement. It's not a jab, it's not a cross. Your whole body has to turn in, it has to move another body. The only way to do that under pressure, especially when the window of opportunity in a fight is so small, the timing has to be so perfect, is to have repped it hundreds, if not thousands of times. And,
See,
and that's important.
That's okay. So in my terminology, what you're saying is you need to create a pattern, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we'll say. Like when you're repping an arm bar, you're repping whatever, you're creating, the instructor, you're confining the variables of a movement, and you're implying your confinements into your student. So you're saying this is what an arm bar looks like, and this is how to execute. And you said something interesting. You have to rep it the same way every time. So now Mark gets down and he has to start repping this armbar. But getting back to what we said before, his ability to take that instruction and execute and learn is going to be dependent, like you said, on his internal environment. And that's what I think people are missing. You can have the best instructor in the world, you and your brain can have the best pattern, but if his body is unable to execute, or if his body is broken, so to speak, and the body doesn't speak to the brain as well as it should, it's going to be difficult to make the pattern that you're asking for. Especially if you don't rep it, which gets me back to my other point, which is, you learned, I don't know, name a move, anything. It's like, when are you getting back to that move?
A wet willy?
A wet willy.
I was reading your face and that's what, I saw wet willy on your face.
Back take to wet willy. When are you going to fucking practice that again? That's the question. Like, are you going to do that again in a year?
Right.
Or are you going to hit it again?
And sometimes as a coach or sometimes within a jiu-jitsu class, guys will get good at something by virtue of having covered it indirectly from different positions. So for example, an armbar,
okay.
You might hit it from guard, you might hit it from mount, you might hit it from side. So you're repping the same move and the same concept. You're pinching the knees together, you're biting down the head, you're turning the wrist out to a certain angle. So indirectly, you're repping the same move.
Okay, different varieties.
Yes,
which
with
is
a similar pattern. So
which
you'll end
is
up getting,
how the body works. We call it dynamic systems, where like jiu-jitsu presents an environment that your system has to figure out how to deal with variables. So the environment is not always set in stone, which is why you're telling people to rep and become amazing at repping, but you know that in live rolling, it's not. So what you're saying is if you give people different touches at how to get a Kimura from here, you're indirectly...
And what I find is sometimes the variety over time can be greater than that individual rep, if that makes sense. That individual positional rep. Because it's also law of diminishing returns. Some people need to be engaged and they can't robotically rep.
Sure.
They're not built like that.
Perfect scenario though. You have the perfect fighter in front of you.
Yeah.
Who do you want? You want someone who can rep.
I want someone that doesn't think.
Yeah, you just want someone that's going to...
You just want a machine that's going to rep.
Yeah.
Is a repping machine. I'm exaggerating to it that doesn't think, but sometimes over-analyzing and thinking too much. Am I doing it? Sometimes you don't want that internal voice. You want a body that you can just push and say, okay, do 1,000 of these, and they're going to do it. That's simple.
Okay, so now let's bring this back to striking. Okay, so I've always been saying this, and then see if you agree. They'll always say, like, for example, Muay Thai. I think we talked about this in another podcast, but I'm not sure. In Muay Thai, you'll say the kicks are the strongest, right? Generally, you say that, you know, if you're versing karate or if you're versing taekwondo, anything, you'll say Muay Thai is the strongest. And I'm not going to disagree with that. But what I will also say is, on top of that fact, there's something different that you do in Muay Thai training that you don't do in taekwondo training and you don't do in karate training, which is use reps as training. See what I'm saying? So this brings us into another topic about how to train someone. If you're doing bag work, right? In my terminology, bag work, if you're going full out, is called max effort work. So, like, you know, when you're in the gym and people are doing max effort deadlifts or squats because they think for some reason it's going to help them kick, when in reality, max effort kicking is likely going to be the thing that makes you kick harder. So I happen to think that when I learned karate, I did a lot of bag work, and I know that old school taekwondo guys, they used to do a lot of bag work, and now there seems to be a lot of air kicking.
Yeah.
And no repping.
To get points, just to make the contact.
Yeah, but you're not, you know, you can throw a karate roundhouse kick or a Muay Thai slam kick. Mechanically, one's going to be stronger, but on top of that, did you actually train the kick? I don't mean practice the kick against a willing opponent. I mean, did you actually put force into your body in the exact way that you're going to have to absorb force, and how many times did you do it? Because then you can't say which one's stronger. You have to say who trained. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can't just hit, you know, those flippy bags that you kind of hold out
The
like that?
clappers.
The clappers. Like, you can't.
But they sound great and parents love them.
And then, you know, what you end up getting is people, when they kick, you hear that, like, slap instead of the thud.
Did you hear there was a study about martial artists that drilled their kicks in the air, and over time, they all have hip issues. I don't know if you heard about this.
I've not.
It's
that's
very
brilliant.
interesting. I'll see if I can find the link.
Yeah.
But this big study came out on martial artists that practice their kicks basically in the air without making contact with anything. And over time, they develop hip issues. So the point is that it's terrible to practice your air kicks.
Well, we talked about it last time about putting input into the tissue, right?
Okay, yeah. That's what I was
so,
gonna
yeah,
say.
yeah,
No, it's yeah. I mean, you're generating force using tissue, and then when you strike someone, you're transmitting the force into another person, but you're also having to absorb force because of the impact. Okay, so all of those things are force load management, and if you're kicking into the air, you've never trained force load management.
There's that, and I don't know if it's something to do with stopping the kick.
Of course, eccentrically stopping the kick is a huge. I mean, when you hit it, that's why I was saying about max effort, because people are so confused. Like, you go under a bench press, and everyone, I go, do you understand how this is a max effort? And they go, of course, this is a max effort. But at the second that you strike that bag, that's the most amount of force you're ever going to feel into your tissue. So that brutal training of the tissue,
And it's exhausting for a reason.
It's But this is where I talk about is that people don't see that as training. It's like they separate it. So for me, when I do bag work, there's some days where I'm doing dynamic bag work. So I'm increasing my velocity. But if you understand what's called the force velocity curve, it says that as you increase velocity in anything, your force has to come down, right? If you're lifting, if you increase the velocity of the lift, you can't lift as much. And if you want to lift more, you have to decrease the velocity. That's just a general training law that we have to abide by. So when I'm doing kick training, it's like, well, what are you doing today? Are you doing max efforts, or are you doing dynamic work? Which, by the way, people in the audience, you'll hear these words and you'll be like, that sounds a lot about like how Westside does training, how they actual training exercises. And that's what I'm saying. These are exercises, right? Like,
and I think everybody wrestles with the ratio of how much of one versus the other.
You're brilliant. Okay.
And that comes, and that's, I think, is connected to every aspect, whether it's powerlifting or just regular strength training or jiu-jitsu or striking arts, it's like, okay, well, how much of this should I do versus this? And I think people tinker with it still. And some people are, really systematized and really organized, and they chart it and they look at results.
Yep.
And there's some things are quantifiable. Okay, well, I lifted and he lifted X number of pounds last week.
Yep.
And we did this, or last month, et cetera, and we can look over time. But it's harder with jiu-jitsu because it's more subjective. It's not a certain weight I'm trying to lift.
Which brings me to another important topic that we're going to talk about actually at the next summit. There's an association bias. And the association bias, and you can talk about this for martial arts or any sport, the association bias is that people think that if I want to get more power, like let's say you're now competing again, if I'm correct, right? You're doing just comp again. So if you're saying I need to be more powerful, maybe you were in your last match, you said I just didn't have the. What people end up doing is they look out into the world and they go, where are the powerful people? And they say, oh, Olympic lifters, they're very powerful, right? And this is where everything falls to shit, because then people say, okay, I'm in jiu-jitsu, I want to be more powerful. Olympic weightlifters, their whole job is power. Let's go ahead and do what an Olympic weightlifter does. And this is where the shit hits the fan, and I'm amazed that people don't understand this, because as soon as you say, okay, I'm going to do what Olympic weightlifters do. Now, first off, you're a good coach, right? You've been studying fighters all this time. You probably don't actively look for Olympic weightlifters to make into jiu-jitsu players. Like if you're a scout, it's not like you would be going around.
It's not the first place I'd look.
It's not the first place. But however, if a jiu-jitsu person says I need more power, everyone seems to look to these lifts, right? Because it's an association problem where people say that if I do that, that's going to make me better here. But there's a law in human physiology called the law of specificity, which is the most studied law in the history of the fucking history of physiology, and you're breaking that law as soon as you say that. Does that make sense?
But then that also implies that there's no transferability.
Okay, so very good question. So it's not that there's no transferability, but is there a better way to transfer abilities? And this is, I'm going to bring this to you.
And hold on a second. And this is not an intervention.
No.
This is not why we're here. I did not brief him.
This is for okay, so let's take Mark as the brown belt, almost grading for black, I think. I don't know, whatever that is.
He's got another 4 years.
So I'll ask a jiu-jitsu guy training, I'll say like, okay, last week, what did you bench? And they'll give me a number. And I'll say, okay, what are you deadlifting right now? And they give me a number. What do you squat? And they give me a number. And then I go, okay, so for your GPP, your general preparedness, or your SPP, your sport prepare, you're cultivating your ability to do these movements, and you're insisting that every week you're trying to get more. You're trying to increase your bench. You're trying to increase your thing. But then I asked him something the other day. I said, what's your squeeze like, and when was the last time you trained your squeeze? And you said, you said what? And here's where I want to go with this. It's like if you're doing jiu-jitsu, what capacity do you want to always bring with you? For sure, it's not the snatch. Like if you only have a certain amount of time. You said it. You only have a certain amount of time in your week. So if you're going to train something, where are the reps of people doing max effort medicine ball squeezes for hold? Because as far as I know, I've never met a jits player that said, you know what, I didn't win that last match because my bench was 10 pounds less than it should be. But I have heard I locked up a rear naked on the wrong arm and I didn't have the squeeze. I couldn't finish. And then the question is, well, how often do you train that squeeze? And that's where I think we should be talking about the conversation about how do you train?
Well, the thing that's interesting is that there's certain exercises that do have specific carryover that you wouldn't otherwise think that would. And I mean, I guess a classic is the deadlift.
Deadlift, I'll give you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in jiu-jitsu, there's times where you're in guard, you're trying to pass, and he's pulling down on your head, and you have to posture.
Absolutely.
Or, that classic hip hinge exercise for hip thrusts or.
Not a snatch.
Not a snatch.
You see, like this is the point. Like, so that's you took one step further and you thought about it, and I'll give you that. I'll 100%. You're breaking posture. You're trying to posture up. You're trying to pass. You're trying to break.
Or you're arm barring.
And you have to extend the.
And you have to extend the
thrusters,
hips.
hip thrusters.
Yeah.
This all makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Bench press. So people will say, well, you know, you have to push people. I can always think of a scenario where that might somehow resemble what you're doing on the ground.
The question is the opportunity cost. There has to be a hierarchy of
Yes.
which are the best exercises that have carryover into your specific sport.
Brilliant.
And I think that right now, because sport jiu-jitsu is getting to a point where people are taking it very seriously for competition, there are groups of people that have identified what makes sense.
Yep.
Whether it's farmers walks or battle ropes, like, but I don't know if there's a specific workout plan that you can copy paste and give to every jiu-jitsu person.
No one.
Because
Yeah.
guys have different specific needs.
Yep.
But I think a big and this is, and I think a big topic with this is, or a big part of this is, how much you're going to burn out in that workout, so that then when you go to training, your grips are actually fried already. So we talked about squeeze. A big thing is, like, we got to work on our grips, whether it's pull-ups or this and that. But are you going to burn out your grips in strength training, so that by the time you go to roll in the evening, you have nothing left?
Okay, so
or how much are you gonna work it?
There's only so much
Output.
that your nervous system can give. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get back to the topic.
Like, I did deadlifts last week.
Sure.
And was fried for days.
Sure.
But
I also want
rolling
people,
like a
you
blue
can't,
belt.
It fucks you up. But
Yeah.
I do want people to understand, though, is that is what programming is, right? You 100% have to be like, if I'm doing max effort squeeze work today, then going and training rear naked choke, whatever it might be. So yeah, you do have to think about where you're spending your energy, which brings me to my point. If I see a jiu-jitsu guy in a gym, and I see them working on a snatch or a clean or any named exercise, because we have a tendency to only think that the exercises that we're given names are real exercises. And
Even put a pin in that for a sec. I mean, anecdotally, you could say, looking at sport jiu-jitsu over the last 10 years, on the world stage, who's it dominated by? Monsters. With the exception of
a few super nerds that are hyper technical.
Mendez brother,
Mikey
Musumeci, and like all those kinds of guys. But so it's this sort of like, jits is still in the dark in a lot of this training, because the assumption is, if you're going to do well, you have to be this jacked.
Okay, let's stay on that.
Monster, and that's what's in the ether. And people go, well, fuck, I have to look like if I'm gonna look like a CrossFitter going in, and jacked to the gills on Mexican supplements or not, right?
There's the bias.
There's the bias.
Yeah. Because conceivably you can. Okay, so here's the example that I like to use. You see, like, Tyrone Woodley, okay, and Tyrone Woodley is going to go fight. And, there's always going to be a Rogan or some commentator is going to go, that dude is strong. Like, that guy is so strong. His wrestling is so strong. And then Ben Askren is up next. And what does the commentator say? That guy's wrestling is so strong. That guy's so strong. And now the question, in my mind, one of the two people wasted a lot of time, conceivably, if we're just going by appearance, and the other person figured it out. And what I'm implying is that it doesn't fucking matter if you look like a He-Man doll. Like, legitimately, you can say that for whatever reason you want to get bigger, you want to get strong, but that
you could look at
doesn't.
the last boxing main event,
Fury
and
Wilder.
Dad bod versus.
Right? And what is this guy's so strong, that guy's so, Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's not like, he's built. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. But he doesn't look like a bodybuilder or like a CrossFitter.
Yeah, he's not like a brick shithouse built, right? And knockout power, unbelievable knockout power. How many guys, Chuck Liddell, how many guys before we start to realize that it's not the application of power to a predetermined movement that someone else invented. It's the application of power when you need power. So personally, what I try to tell, especially now we're all getting older and you're training, and you have to really, and like what you said, you have to think about where you're investing your time.
So what would you answer if a guy asked you?
Okay.
So listen, I need to get better at jiu-jitsu. Because at the end of the day, people are going to want to come to you for
Sure.
the final answer.
Yeah.
Say, but it's true. I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. We can talk about what lifts or whatever, but what kind of protocol are we going to do? Are we going to do 5x5s? Are we going to do 10 x 3s?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Because I need explosive power.
Yes.
But then I also need stamina. Like I need to be strong in 5 minutes.
Yes.
As well.
Yep.
So I'm working on different systems.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's.
I feel like it's complicated.
It is, unfortunately, is that the body seems to be way more fucking complicated than people want it to be.
Just figure it out. Right?
Yeah, and I don't know how to make this I don't know how to make it easier, because it is what it is, and everything you said needs to be upkeep. So give me the question again, generally.
So a guy wants to be better at performing at jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Do we just build him as a better athlete overall?
Okay.
And program him to be stronger with the classic strength of 3 reps, 10 sets, for example, or 8 sets, and then change it every week and 6 and
yeah.
Or is there a specific volume and number which can change based on age, right? Because obviously,
okay, so let's go general though, because I can't give you
no
because it has to be the person.
Sure.
Yeah, okay,
an average adult.
So at the beginning of this, you said what percentage of training is for like you versus in the gym. So I look at that as internal versus external training. So what we're describing is external training: bench press, squat, deadlift, all of these names. Anytime when you say a name of an exercise, I'm going to say some dude made that shit up, right? Somebody made it up. So they've patternized you into this exercise and you're trying to replicate the exercise. So let's call that external, because the result, good or bad, it's an external result. I made the lift or I snatched the weight. So the goal is the snatch. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay. Yoga. People often talk to me about, they're like, is yoga good for you? Like, dude, I don't know you. I know that yoga is good for yoga. So what's the reason for yoga?
I think that for guys,
it's to get good at yoga.
That for guys, the goal with yoga is also the snatch.
100%. I was right there. I was right there.
I killed his train of thought. I got his mind in the gutter and I killed his train of thought.
Okay, I remember.
You were talking about complicated things.
Internal versus external. Okay, so you said, what's the percentage? In my mind, and I can argue this with literature, if let's say you're a weightlifter, your job is powerlifting. You should probably be at a 50-50 internal to external training, meaning that 50% of your training should just be about my shoulder and what it can and cannot do. And then 50% of the training can be about making lifts. But if you're a jiu-jitsu player, or if you're a grappler or a MMA guy, I think that the numbers start working out to be somewhere around 90-10 or 80-20. In that the amount of internal training that you should be doing should exceed the amount of external training. Now, forget about the jiu-jitsu training. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is when you are bench pressing, for example, I can coach you on the bench press. I can tell you how to bench press. I can tell you to pinch your shoulders back. I can tell you to do it like a power lifter. But the fact of the matter is that Mark's shoulder is the one doing the bench press, right? So let's say, for example, Mark doesn't have a lot of shoulder room. So, I tell him move his shoulder. He's like, oh, fuck. So that means his shoulder, it's limited as to where it's able to go. So when he bench presses, his shoulder can only go into this position, which means you're overloading the same tissue over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Does that make sense? What Mark should be doing is he should be breaking open room in his shoulder so that when he goes to the bench press, he can bring more of his muscle into the exercise. Does that make sense? Just like saying if you're a BJJ player and you're doing a bench press and someone's like, that's not how you bench press, and they start to coach you like a power lifter, stop listening immediately, because you're not a power lifter. Your goal with a bench press is to put more mass in different areas so that when you're out here, you can pull that arm in. Or if you're getting kimura'd, you have the millisecond that you can sneak out, right? So it's you're not trying to get good at the bench press. That's a misnomer. Getting good at a bench press means that you're becoming more efficient at it, which is why I say if you go swimming, swimming is only good exercise if you don't know how to fucking swim. As soon as you know how to swim, you've accommodated to the water. So you've made it more easy and more efficient to swim. And therefore, as a training stimulus to make you better cardio-wise, it's less effective. But you're getting better at swimming. Does that make sense? So getting back to it, I think a jiu-jitsu player needs to take account for their body and really say, you know, where does my shoulder do? What does it do? What can it do? If you do this and this is how your shoulder moves, pick any exercise. It's going to stress the same shit, and you can't indefinitely stress stuff. If you adapt the tissue, there's an upper limit of how much it's going to adapt. If you keep stressing, it's going to break, right? So then I'll ask anybody, a jiu-jitsu player, like, your squat, how long have you been squatting? How long have you been deadlifting? And they'll say, you know, I've been deadlifting for 30 years. And I was like, so you should deadlift 17,000 pounds by now. But you don't. Why? Well, I get injured. Okay, I got injured. Or I hit a plateau and I couldn't break through the plateau. Well, yeah, but the plateau is not the deadlift. You're the plateau. Like like Mark. Mark can only deadlift what Mark's body allows him to right now, and he's going to hit a point where it's not going to happen. So now what do? We make better Mark. Does that make sense? And that's the easiest answer I can give you to how do you take... You have the person who's about to do the activity.
You're talking about prepping the body for the exercise.
Yes.
But let's assume that the person's body the joint is healthy. It's moving. He's got a decent functional range for what he needs for his art.
Yes.
At that point, he comes to you and he says, all right, and let's leave the bench press out because I don't think a lot of guys...
Just as an example.
For sure.
Yeah.
But are we talking about a programming that is super varied? Like, for example, CrossFit, they talk about being generalists.
Yes.
Like, that's a big thing with CrossFit is being fitness generalists. They're not trying to be specifically good for jiu-jitsu or boxing or basketball. They are fitness generalists. They want to be overall, be able to run 400 meters. They want to be able to sprint. They want to be able to lift at the same time. Like, it's kind of a balance of all the different fitness components. So is the programming then going to be for jiu-jitsu general, or is it going to vary over time to satisfy the needs of both the explosiveness mixed with the stamina?
It's both. So we're going to make an assumption that the person has enough workspace in their joints to do what they want to do. That's the assumption.
Yeah.
First off, we're all agreeing that's an enormous assumption. Like,
sure.
If you're listening to this, I can almost guarantee that you are not that person, right? Because I've assessed all of these people. Man alive, okay, so let's assume that you have everything. Then what I would say is,
because you're saying spend less time on lifting, spend more time on your articular rotations.
Okay, but no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying spend less time on lifting. I'm saying redefine what you think is a max effort. Because I can put someone. Okay, so let's see an example. Let's say someone has no shoulder, right? That it doesn't rotate, and a shoulder has to rotate. So this shoulder doesn't rotate. So technically, you don't have a shoulder. If your shoulder doesn't rotate, you don't have a shoulder. That's just by definition. So any named exercise you try to do with your shitty shoulder, it's going to come out shit because your shoulder's the one doing it.
And you'll make it worse.
Right? So in that person, I would say, well, you don't have any internal rotation, so you should be working on internal rotation. And here's where everyone gets confused, because people think that you're saying, oh, Dre, you're saying don't work hard now. That's not what I said. For me, internal rotation, we would do something like a pails and rails, which if you're not familiar, it's isometric loading. So I'll put you in a position you don't have. I make you breathe in, and I make you isometrically load your shoulder just as fucking hard as you were coming into a max effort deadlift. So here's the confusion, is that I show myself doing a crazy hard pail set with all of my energy blasting into external rotation to get this tissue to respond. Or you see someone doing a crazy deadlift. and everyone looks at the deadlift and goes, that person's exercising, this person's just rehabbing. But that's the mentality that's wrong, because to my body, if I'm accessing tissue I've never trained before,
You're training.
and I'm going full out,
You're training your body. You're training your body.
Okay, so all of the endocrine benefits, which is the hormonal benefits from deadlifting, I'm getting it doing this exercise. All of the general neurological drive benefits from deadlifting, I'm getting it with this exercise. So here's what I'm telling people to do. If that's you, I'm not saying don't deadlift, but deadlift gets put down here as something you might maintain, but you're not max efforting your deadlift, because we all agree you only have a certain...
It becomes your accessory work.
It becomes your accessory work. Your shoulder is now the goal. So I'm not saying don't train hard. Like if you, I've trained you, when I train people with mobility work, which I don't even know what the fuck that means anymore, I'm going full bore, man. Like, I'm fucking making you a hip if you don't have one.
And
So
then-
it's just a matter of...
Do they cry?
And,
Yeah,
oh,
fuck.
well, yeah,
Does he?
Yeah. Well, if you made some instructors cry. But the extension of that too is, and you covered it in the last summit, is, okay, let's take somebody that's like, yeah, great. You have all the prerequisites. You have a great shoulder. Now you're introducing the speed and velocity training into those joints. So it's the same thing. Your internal training just gets ramped up. So
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I'm back to human now. I have my functional shoulder. Now let me go back to deadlifting.
Now make yourself a robotic, crazy-ass shoulder.
Right.
And, like, again, we can't talk...
At length.
Yeah, we can't
Yeah.
talk in too many
Yeah.
specifics on a podcast, but
Yeah.
here's another concept that people might want to consider, right? This is like a length tension curve, so this is the amount of force that you can generate, right? And this is, let's call this the angle or the length of your muscle, right? Everyone pretty much generates the most amount of strength in their mid-range of motion. So this is mid-range. This is where all standard model training occurs. What do I mean by standard model training? We just talked about it. If you name me an exercise, that's a pattern. If you name me an exercise and you name me a pattern, I'm going to tell you that you've done most of the work in here. Why? Because even when you're doing an exercise, if you think you're working full range of motion, as soon as you fatigue, you're going to start to cut off the ends. Does that make sense? So if you're doing bicep curls, as soon as you get tired, you start to break the curl down into smaller and smaller. So the amount of work you've done here is immense. I always say train where you're weak, and on these two ends, these are the lowest hanging fruits in my opinion. So if you take a jits guy, I might actually say, instead of working the mid-range of the exercise, if you want a strong shoulder, you work the shoulder where it's weak. You know where your shoulder's weak? While you're getting kimura'd.
At the end of the range.
At the end of the range.
Yeah.
In jiu-jitsu, that's like, and again, you're the expert. If you're in a kimura, so someone has you in a kimura.
Oh yeah.
Now you don't have time to think about this, but if we slowed everything down, if I can give you 5 more milliseconds,
Sure.
that's what you'd want.
Well, I guess the kind of the classic example is Hoyler versus, when you look back to classic MMA matches, is Hoyler versus Sakuraba. Hoyler has phenomenal range.
Yep.
And incredible flexibility. I don't know what his functional range is.
Sure.
But incredible. We'll call it flexibility for now.
Yep.
And his hand was behind his back, and it was a super kimura, but he wasn't tapping. The same way with when Eddie Bravo had him in the I don't even know what position it was in the end.
Vaporizer.
It was a vaporizer in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
Yeah, and he wasn't tapping.
Yeah. Yep.
But in Japan, they stopped the fight because your shoulder was done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Shoulder was done.
Yeah.
But for him, he was fine. He's looking at the rep because he's comfortable in that range.
Was he fine, or was he just sucking it back? Because that looked painful as shit.
Honestly, after seeing what he didn't tap to that Eddie had him in,
Yeah.
20 years later,
Yeah.
he was probably fine. Was he going to get out?
Yeah. He was holding his gi, right? If I remember correctly,
But-
because he had to have gi pants on.
And don't forget, Sakuraba broke Hanzo's arm.
I remember that.
So
And Henzo wanted to keep fighting.
yeah, because at a certain point, you don't even actually feel the pain.
Sure. And
You
Henzo's
just
a
it just
fucking-
like pops, right?
Henzo's a badass.
Yeah. All right, badass. But the key is to be able to power out at that point. Is it going to be relevant because the other guy's got 2 hands on you?
Sure.
So, like, are you ever going to be able to make it strong enough to a point where it's relevant?
No, but you can buy seconds.
Yeah, and so that's the key
Yeah.
is to be able to buy seconds, because maybe you can get your hip out, you can maneuver, you have a chance to just twist the arm out and change the angle, and then all of a sudden you're out of the position. So all that kind of stuff matters. And I think in the end range, a second or 2 seconds is huge.
Okay, so
and think about how many times you slapped it on like a white belt with no range.
Oh, they just tap
And
right
they're
away.
tapping, you're like, I haven't done anything yet. It's just they have no shoulder.
So let's think about that. So I'm rolling you, and this assume everyone has the knowledge. Let's make this more believable. I'm rolling you. You put me in a Kimura within like the first.
You're,
fucking
knowing you,
millisecond.
your shoulders
my
coming
shoulders-
out.
Look, but if I'm back there, right? How about we pause, and then we do some hard ass isometric sets from that position. And then I tell you you were weak, so I've told you that this is not you have a problem with this. You don't have a problem with your bench press, right? Nobody has a problem with their bench press as it relates to jiu-jitsu. But you could for sure have a problem with a lack of internal rotation or a lack of the ability to produce or absorb force in internal rotation. So the question is, what's more important in scheduling that dude's exercising? Is it snatching?
Is it strength or is it healthy joints?
Or is it, fuck that, put them together. Is it strength in healthy joints where you need it most?
Right.
And that gets back to here. This is the Kimura, and this is where you tap. Why would you tap there? Because this is not something that's trained, which is what I'm saying. If I could somehow lift this up, it's never going to be the same. But if I can make this kind of more like that, I get more time. So it's always to me a question where everyone's running around, what exercise do I do? Do snatches because strong people do snatches. Train like a sprinter because sprinters are powerful. Or train like a jiu-jitsu person. Don't change your mind. It's the same thing. Work hard. Just redefine.
Can I play devil's advocate?
No, you can't. You can't because it's the Dr. and Juro Spina podcast. Yeah, go ahead.
So while that is important to work, it still
Yes.
comes down to opportunity cost.
Sure.
The amount of time I'm going to sit and work on this and be
Yep.
here. Or I could say to myself, well, how often is someone going to get me in a fucking Kimura?
I got to
Because-
pause you. Okay. You're
But I'm
simultaneously...
passing. But I didn't even finish.
No, but I have to stop because you're simultaneously doing two things. Number one, your position-specific training. Number two, you're making your shoulders stronger, which automatically translates into any named exercise you do. No one will tell you that having a better shoulder doesn't make you bench better. It doesn't make sense. So if I can get you stronger in shoulder, it's not a waste of time. That's the problem. People think it's a waste of time because I got to get back to those important lifts. But you don't. Forget the Kimura. Let's just say that we're training the end range of internal rotation to make you incredibly strong at end range internal rotation. Guess what? Now you have end range internal rotation. That's going to translate to me Kimura-ing you if you were drugged and unconscious, right? Or whatever. So I think that's where we have to, I think what I'm trying to say is that I want to train you, and I want to train you, and I could give a shit about what everyone else tells me I'm supposed to be getting strong at.
And I guess another example would
I'm
be,
pointing to the gym, by the way, because if you were here, you would know that that way is our gym.
I thought that was the way to the gun show.
That's over there.
but when we talk about this, so this is, again, we're being very specific with jits, right? Of, well, how many times am I going to get caught in that particular position? And so is there a lot of diminishing returns? Because I'd rather spend my time, it's like you're rejecting the initial thing. But if you talk to one of our other instructors, John Quint, who works with world-class bodybuilders, right, who are doing a list of pretty standardized, like these are the lifts they do and these are these are the exercises they do. He's still all about this because what's he want to do? He wants to access more
tissue,
more range. You want a guy's legs to get bigger? Great, give him more range, give him more tissue to access.
Again, it's the confusion.
Look up John Quint.
You think that I'm saying don't train, don't get strong, but what I'm saying is train and get strong differently because, like I said, if you're doing a bench press and I say this is how you do it. I mean, I can go so many ways with this. So let's say this is your pec. This is the way that they draw a pec. You know, on those machines that you find in the
Yes, that is the chest.
The pec.
That is the.
So
It's not. That's how it is on the Batman suit too.
Exactly. So this is what they do, and it fucking drives me crazy. On the little machine, the picture beside you, they do this and they color the whole damn thing in. As if to say, this exercise is for your chest. But there's no such thing as your chest. Because this represents literally thousands of individual muscle fibers. Literally. Thousands and thousands of individual muscle fibers. And if I take one of those muscle fibers out, each one of those fibers is its own muscle by way of the force tension curve, the force length, the force velocity. It's its own muscle. So the question becomes, if you put me under a bench press and you go, no, you're not doing it right, do it like this. Pinch your shoulders, arch your back, I want you doing it here. What you're saying is, I just want to train these ones. I like the pattern that activates that tissue. And now if I take that tissue cannot indefinitely adapt. So eventually, I'm going to either break that tissue, or I'm going to hit an upper plateau as to how strong that tissue can get. But if a jiu-jitsu player is training, and let's say we're using the bench press, because I think bench is fine, it's not a matter of getting into the bench press and doing it like you were told. It's a matter of saying, where are you weak? If I push up that way, okay, let's rep out there, sure. Now, internally rotate a bit, let's rep out there. Move a bit, let's rep out there. Because what I want to do is I want to find as many lines as I can, especially in something like jiu-jitsu, because for sure I'm not going to be here, I might be here, I might be there, I might be there, I might be here, I might be here. So what's the goal of training? Is it to get a better chest? Or is it to specifically pull in more of your chest so that I pull in all of these fibers so that I adapt everything instead of just adapting the one line that the exercise activates? So I hope that's helpful. Like, if people, I can't go over the whole system, but I would recommend that be careful about being a great power lifter if that's not your intention. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's not your goal, then powerlifting's not your goal. And if you say, well, how about yoga? Is yoga good for jiu-jitsu? I'm going to say yoga is good for yoga. Mark's body is good for jiu-jitsu. If Mark's body is such that yoga will help it, that's fine. But there's a lot of people who should not be going to yoga for the same reason that they should not be doing Olympic lifts. They're just not ready for it. So, in a nutshell, what does that mean? It means a complete rethinking of what you're doing. We talked about the squeeze. How many times a week are you hitting the squeeze?
So but it means that jiu-jitsu instructors should be having their students do pails and rails instead of push-ups as warm-up for class.
Oh, hey, that's my warm-up.
Listen, I'm not going to say push-up. Yes, I mean, essentially is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Even in the gym,
and I think the classic jiu-jitsu warm-up has to change.
Oh my god. So I've been like you. I've been doing martial arts since I can remembering, and then I went and I studied like motor control and how people learn and then I'm looking at what we were doing. I was like, what are we doing? Like, you go to a martial arts club and the warm-up, not your club, but many clubs, by the time the warm-up's done, that person is just annihilated. Like, they're and the
coach is proud of it.
I love hearing
my warm-up kills dude. If you can get through my warm-up.
And they say strange things, and jiu-jitsu people are good for that. They say strange things like, well, if you can roll now, that you're getting used to rolling tired. That's not how life works. Like, it's just not. It's not how. If you're gonna teach me something very complicated with regards to motor learning, like grabbing a lapel and doing this and that and this, for fuck sure you don't want someone who's exhausted. Like, you want 100% of their nervous system ready. So if anything, warm up, train, fuck them up later. Right?
And I think the argument with the jiu-jitsu coaches is they don't want you being strong doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I know from experience coaching, the strongest guys that come into the class are always the most shit.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to relax.
Sure.
And their joints are actually too tight.
Probably.
They don't have any range, let alone a functional range.
Sure.
But the reality is, those strongest guys are probably going to be the ones least tired after that warm-up.
What do you mean?
Like, if you're just smashing them in the warm-up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They're already in better shape than most.
But going back to but the coach wants you not using strength in the rolling so that you're forced to rely on technique. The problem is, at that point, you are not in a position to protect your joints from damage and from ranges that are actually going to be hurtful.
If you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make sense from a motor control or motor learning standpoint, and it doesn't make sense from a safety standpoint, right? So yeah, that would be.
But at the same time, you got to balance it out, because you do have to know how to roll when you're tired.
Sure, but that's just you have to have an amazing gas tank, and you have to learn how to roll calm. I don't know, and again, you're the expert here, but as much as when somebody, you start your roll and everyone's like, okay guys, just like 70%, right? And then you
whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever the fuck that is. And then as soon as you start
110.
100 every fucking, so it's almost like your instructor should continuously remind us, slow it down, technique, slow it down, technique, because nowadays, man, people just go fucking balls out immediately.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
But, not to take a left turn too deep down a rabbit hole. So you mentioned the conditioning part of it too, right? So I think,
that's the second part. Yeah.
So again, and we've had this conversation, like Joel and I, about like improving gas tank and then what's the best thing. So and obviously we talk about a lot at seminars. Building your gas tank doesn't come from just rolling.
Okay. Exactly. Do you have more?
Nah, that's enough.
That's it. Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. It's like, forget strength. Strength is one thing. What I said conceptually, people might have a hard time understanding, but in this example, it might be better. So, gas tank. Let's talk about cardio. So, somewhere along the way, I don't know when it happened, the assumption was that you don't need to do any long distance, low intensity work. You just have to do interval work. Just go fucking crazy, right? So every time someone comes to a cardio workout, it's like, how can I make this person puke? Or what can I do to push my level of pukiness a little further? So everything's done at 100% intensity.
Well,
Now,
the knowledge at one point was, and this was like among the elite, was the best way to train the aerobic is to train the anaerobic, and then you actually train both.
Fucking brilliant.
And you want to be good at long distance? Do sprints.
Wrong. Right, but wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because they forgot something. And it harkens back to what we were saying about, if I'm training him, I have to train the physical shit that makes up his body. Like the muscles and the ligaments, and they have to...
And the scar tissue.
Yeah.
Okay. And the arthritis.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit.
So what I was saying is, don't just take a shitty... Not that you're a shitty body, but don't take someone's shitty body and throw them into the gym and
so
say...
So far he's called you a meat wagon.
Meat
shitty wagon.
Shitty body.
It's a lot of
That's why I have
body shaming going on.
But you put him into the gym and you say, do all of these crazy lifts. And what you're forgetting is that you have to prepare the body, the muscle tissue itself. Now, with regards to cardio, people have forgot that they have to train the ability to output, but the meat that makes the difference is your heart, right? How do you train your heart? And by doing things fast, it doesn't physically make you a better heart. Okay, so there's something called eccentric hypertrophy of your ventricles. So a ventricle and a heart.
That happened to me yesterday.
I heard that. I heard it crack.
At the end of the second round, laying on my back, I definitely felt eccentric. What was it called?
Eccentric hypertrophy. So let's say you have your atria and your ventricles. I'm giving this as your heart. So, one of these pumps.
Mine is more black.
One of your heart. One of your pumps blood to the body, and another one pumps it to your lungs. Okay, and this is your black heart in its entirety.
Incredible.
This heart you speak of.
Perfect.
Now, if I do hard, intense CrossFit shit, what I'm telling the heart to do is contract as hard as you can, right? Fast. The fact of the matter is, and I'm not going to go into this detail, when you contract a muscle fast versus slow, it's not the same mechanism. And it doesn't work the same way. If you always go fast, you're getting your heart to get accustomed to going fast. But physically, you'll never change your heart. Because as blood pools in your ventricle, the ventricle accepts blood and then squeezes it out. But if you're just saying, squeeze, 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 you're getting a very small amount of blood in your ventricle before you push out. If you're doing long distance work at a low intensity, right?
Diesel.
Yeah, like Nick Diaz type shit, where you're going running, like you're going long distance intensity, very low.
you pool way more blood into your ventricle, so your ventricle actually has to get bigger. It fills so much that the physical material in your heart changes so that it can accept more blood and more blood. This is called eccentric hypertrophy. This is a training goal just like contracting fast. So to answer your question, what do I do cardio-wise? Yeah, you should be doing interval training. You should be rolling hard and fatiguing the shit out of yourself. But there should be times during the week where you're training low level 2 work. What I mean by low level 2 is heart rate's low, but for a way longer distance. And it's the same as strength training. You have to train you and the lifts. For cardiovascular training, you have to train the heart and the output.
And this is new for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's old, but it's new again, yes. Yeah, because people, like you said, you're right. Something happened along the way where people were like,
Yeah, it was all hit
road
training.
work.
I want to get all my workout done in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm good for the rest of the day and the rest of the week.
and I can't understand why my fucking back hurts.
Right.
So you took all of your physical activity that from an evolutionary process should have been spread across 24 hours, and you decided to put it all into a 35-minute espresso class at your gym. And then your tissues explode, and everyone's like, I don't know what the fuck happened. Of course you do. Of course you can't take a day's worth of work and put it into an hour and expect your tissues to not suffer, right? That's why, like, a training day for me, I say when you wake up, you start training, it stops when you go back to sleep. For guys like, in martial arts world, you have to start opening your body when you wake up, and you can't stop opening your body until you sleep.
Sounds exhausting.
It's not really. It's just move around, man. You know what I mean?
So we're talking about a 45-minute power walk or jog.
For this?
Yes.
For this, I'm talking about even an hour of a low, if you have a heart rate monitor, it's level 2 training. So your heart rate gets, 1 is like daily activity. 2 is like there's it's a long distance, low. Generally, you'll be able to have a conversation while you're doing it. It's not a good measure, but it's a comfortable workout where if your buddy was beside you and you wanted to talk during your workout, you could do it without getting out of breath. That level. A low sustained drudge. Could be running. Most people, when they run, they come out of zone 1 anyway, so most people shouldn't use running.
Yeah,
But
cycling.
Cycling's a good way to keep it low, but again, it's not like you only do that. That'll fuck you up too. You have to do high interval, low interval. You have to train for specifically for your tissue, as well as how efficient the tissue is. Right now, everyone's only working on how efficient the tissue is, but their tissue is of shitty quality, which is a problem. So it's the same. It's cardio versus strength. It's the same thing. It's like you have to think, what tissue am I trying to get at? What am I trying to do with the tissue? So you're not just learning how to become a bench presser.
This sounds like the classic what boxers would call road work.
Road work. Yeah. And I mean,
It's funny.
yeah.
Classic, right? It's old.
It's old. It's
old.
like,
But something happened in the last 20 years with these hit workouts, and we've had this conversation watching certain people's like fitness classes, right? And I'll watch a 45-minute class or an hour class, and I'm cringing because I'm going, yeah, half those people shouldn't be doing 90% of those exercises from a prerequisite standpoint, or they're dead. It's just that hit thing. It's like, yeah, I know, but they didn't improve anything. They got their sweat in because instead of having, say, an 80-20 rule of like slow to fast, it's 100 hit work. That's all it is. So yeah, you feel spent at the end of the class. They're lying down. You smashed them. Yay! I had a great workout. Did you?
yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
And that's why we always make jokes, about the embrace the suck. Just embrace the suck. Yeah, there's a time to embrace the suck. You're in competition. You're 3 fights in, right? You don't want to be there. You're tired. You're gassed. Yeah, there's a mental game that you have to do. But do you want to do that over prolonged training? Hey, run an extra 10 miles. I don't know. It feels like my knee's going to fall out. Right? Just embrace the suck. Oh, hey, Mark, you have a shredded meniscus. You're not running for the next 6 months.
Don't embrace the. I don't know who the fuck said that. People gotta stop with this shit. I don't care if you're tired. Push through. That's what dumb people say before they get hurt.
Yes.
And I'm so tired of going.
Can you put that on a shirt?
I should I don't care about.
But that's for sure an Instagram post.
Yeah, I don't care about being tired. I put man, that's dumb. That's not
That's not what smart people do. You know what I'm saying? Like, just work hard. If that was the answer, why the fuck do we have sports science?
Right.
Like, why do I even have a job if all you need to do is work hard, and then when you puke, just keep fucking going? Like your bench press. Just keep going. How long have you been bench pressing? Like fucking 43 years.
So would
Just keep
you
going.
say working in this system is equal in terms of, let's say your time is finite
Yeah.
in a week.
Yeah.
You're going to do cardio 4 times.
Sure.
Whether cardio is this or that.
Yeah.
Would you split 2 and 2?
Are you still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing a lot of intense work.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot. So if you're asking me, if you're a jits guy in the audience and you're listening to this, should you maybe take your extra work and tone down so you can put more level 2? Yes, I would think so.
So
You don't need, you're rolling so much anaerobically.
That-
you,
yeah.
you could be rolling 5 times a week, literally.
That's
like
training.
4 times a week. There's your HIIT workout.
That is training.
Right?
and so
And then-
so what's going to improve your jiu-jitsu faster is that workout, not the sprints.
No,
Correct.
you're already sprinting. It's like, I train in the morning, I go to jits in the evening. What'd you do in the morning? I did sprint work. What'd you do in the evening? I did different sprint work. No, right? What a waste of time. What'd you do in the morning? I worked on the physical ability for my heart to function as a human heart should. What'd you do in the evening? I practiced my heart.
You ever hear these? I knew of a marathon runner, local guy, young, family, heart attack. Middle or end of a marathon.
Yeah.
And
It's
it-
not uncommon, eh?
And the heart has, my understanding is, it's like city miles. The heart can only work so much for so long, and then
You have an expiry date.
you have an expiry date.
There is a certain an average number of heartbeats that you get.
Yeah.
Right? So you can think of your life as trips around the sun,
Yeah.
or heartbeats. It's generally,
So if you're a guy listening to the podcast
Yes.
and you're super active, whether it's triathlons or Ironman or CrossFit or Jiu-Jitsu, at what point should you regularly be getting your heart checked? And how?
okay, so
And why do I think about this? Because there's times where I'm rolling or I've rolled and I think, I don't know what a heart attack feels like, but I know that my heart's racing at a level right now that I'm having trouble catching my breath. Or someone's holding you in side control after a crazy scramble and they're compressing and you can't get enough oxygen in to breathe,
yeah.
right? And your heart's working.
I had that conversation with a blue belt last week, right? One of our Persian friends, who I'm like, "You okay?" He goes, "Yeah."
Was he coughing?
No. Yeah, he was coughing right in my mouth. It was very strange, and we weren't on the mat. So, no, but he was saying, he was just like, oh, like I have this pain here. I'm like,
Quick, grab some aspirin.
no, but it's literally, I'm like, it settled down, whatever. I'm like, do you get a physical? Like, you get blood work and everything else? Yeah. Every time you go, like once a year or get an EKG. You should be 100% be getting tested all the time.
There's a lot to unpack there. First off,
Yeah.
it's a fucking fact that there's quite a few marathon runners that drop dead during a marathon. It's so the only thing I can say to that is in my job in medicine, I work in percentages, and what you're doing when you're training for your health is you're just giving yourself a better chance. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to drop dead tomorrow. Like you know what I mean? Like you can be the best marathon runner in the world, and for whatever fucking reason, dead. But what I would say with the other thing is like you're getting rolled, you're rolling, you have this crushing thing into your heart. Your heart feels like it's going to explode out of your chest. Your heart's working really, really hard. That's generally what we're saying. So the question is how do you make that person better? My answer was build a better heart. Because if you just keep beating the fuck out of it, are you going to get better, or does your jiu-jitsu get better and then you stop working as hard and then you feel like your cardio's improved? This is the other weird thing. I'm like, my chest was beating out of my chest, and a year later, I don't have that feeling anymore. I must be cardiovascularly more fit. Or you're just better at jiu-jitsu and you've accommodated. Just like the water example. Like, it's easier to swim. Well, yeah, man, you know how to fucking swim now. So don't let that feeling be your guide. The fact of the matter is if you have that feeling, it means your particular heart, under the stress it's under right now, it's trying to output what you want, but it can't. It's at its limit. So the limit is determined by the physical makeup of the heart, as well as your will and power, and I want to push through. But physically, you want to tell people to build a good heart. That should be, you do this when you teach, but that should be the moral of the podcast, is that you're bringing yourself to your training, and it's your body that has all of the limitations from then on, right? It's your body. If you can teach anyone how to do a great triangle, I've seen it a billion times. The deterring factor is never you, it's the person. It's always the person's body as to whether or not it's even an option.
Last night we went through that with the mounted triangle setups.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just couldn't figure out how to I can't lock it up, because they're just not used to having access to the range of motion or body control of And again, you go around and you're going to correct them no, put your hips higher, do this, post out here, make some space. It's coachable, but some people it's oh yeah, you for sure shouldn't be doing a triangle. You have no hips. You're done. Yeah, let's go to something else.
I don't think we can expect people to put that into play, but it's the truth though. If you had a best case scenario and you watched a person and you watched their shitty attempt at a triangle, and then you're like, can you show me your hip? And you're like, you don't have a fucking hip. That person should probably be doing arm bars. You know what I mean? Triangle's just not in the fucking...
That's not your game.
It's not in the...
Yeah.
But sometimes working the triangle can improve your hip.
Depending, yes.
Not in your definition of a perfectly functional range
For
of
the triangle.
being able to bring their leg on their
Sure.
own towards their
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
But
There is that, and that's another...
and the other thing is sometimes people don't realize that they have a shitty hip until they realize the limitation by having to execute a triangle. And some people don't have the motivation to work on that joint until they see the limitation of the inability to perform this exercise.
But I think what usually happens is, and our brother Sean there,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a great example, is they'll make an accommodation somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And they'll cheat themselves into finishing the triangle. Mm-hmm. So that really haven't
pull down on the head.
Yeah, they really haven't built any better of a hip. They just sort of figured out a temporary hack to sort of get into that position, which listen is valid if it works, but eventually their hip's still going to blow.
How was it different before? When did you... Tell us the story. So when was that fight with you and Rumina Sato?
98.
98. So as far as... I don't really know the story, so you can refresh me in the story. Were you training for that fight, or was that just put on your lap?
Both.
So you were training for him? How the fuck did that happen is my question.
So why don't we dial it back a little bit? You could explain sort of the circumstances of how you ended up in Japan.
Oh.
Fighting Sato and Shudo.
Okay.
With zero MMA experience.
You're right. Yeah. Well, gather round, children. I'll give you the short version of the fight. I was training with Carlos Newton at the time, who had been sent to Japan and had beaten the Vale Judo Champion Eric Paulson, who was a big deal at that time. And then the Japanese said to my coach, well, do you have anybody else? And he said, yeah. And at that point, it was funny because I was senior to Carlos. So it's when he asked if, do you have anybody else? It was kind of I got someone. And we had seen video of Sato prior to that, just smashing people. He'd beat up an American fighter whose name is escaping me now, but that everybody was kind of afraid of at the time. And he smashed him. And then my coach said, when we were watching the VHS tape, in class, he's like, oh, don't worry, you won't have to fight that guy. And then the Japanese sent a fax, and they said, we would like Mr. Sato to fight Mr. Gerson, and we'll pay Mr. Gerson this amount of money, and we'll bring him back if he loses, 2 more times and whatever. And I don't even know where I thought of it, but I said to my coach, I said, okay, fine, but if I win, I want this much. And the Japanese kind of laughed and signed the fax back and went, okay, sure, no problem. Because he was 10-0, and he was on all the lists. He was considered the pound for pound champion. And then we started training for the fight. My coach was out of town for a lot of the training, so I was doing the best I could with what we had.
How long did you have?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It was like maybe 6 weeks, 2 months. I don't remember. No, I don't think it was 2 months. I think it was like,
Okay.
I would guess it would be around 6 weeks.
Okay.
Something like that. The problem is training for a guy that you can't duplicate in practice.
Sure.
So
We
how do
hear
you
that.
mimic these patterns?
We hear that a lot
Nobody,
with- yeah.
nobody moves like that guy.
Okay.
So how do I get my training partners to? How do I prepare for that pattern ahead of time, so that it's not a shock to my system when I get in there? And you can do it as much as possible, but
It's always a shock, I'm assuming.
it's terrible. Like to get like when he kicked my leg, it was like you feel it through your spine.
Oh,
I don't.
This is violence.
Oh, I don't want to do this ever again.
Yeah.
But you can't get kicked like that in training, really, because you just break down.
Yeah.
Like it breaks your body down. Or at least if there was a way to do it back then, we didn't know.
No, getting kicked sucks no matter what.
Yeah, and I mean, long story short, I ended up getting the victory back then, but
Armbar second round?
first round.
Was it first round?
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. I wouldn't, yeah. We didn't want to go to. I didn't want to go to a second round.
Fuck that.
No, then we'd have to start standing again and all that kind of stuff. But the point is like how back then it was the Wild West. How do you train all these different systems, including recovery, and still get strong and do jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and boxing and wrestling and all that and mix it together.
What did you do though? So that's a good question. So let's arguably say you had 6 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Some
what your
positional, a
training-
lot of positional sparring from positions that I knew he was really good at.
Okay.
So how to avoid the triangle, how to avoid flying arm bars, leg locks, how to avoid like he was dangerous in a lot of places. Some kickboxing sparring, obviously, not enough.
Sure.
Like we just started striking,
Yeah.
not that long prior
Yeah.
to that. And then I do recall also doing weights.
You did some weights
Yeah.
as an adjunct.
Yeah. But it was very hard to rest enough and to coordinate everything because the boxing coach is not talking to the jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah.
And the jiu-jitsu coach is also your strength coach. And what the fuck does he know anyways?
Yeah. Again, diminishing returns. I think a lot of people are wasting a lot of time. Like I would have said exactly what you would have said. Like if you said,
And the
Dre,
problem-
you have
and the-
6 weeks.
Yeah.
I would have been like, well, that's exactly what you would do.
Yeah. And the problem is as an athlete, as soon as you start to question stuff and you doubt, and as soon as you doubt the process or the coach or the link between everything, you carry that into the ring.
Sure.
And it's a nightmare because it eats away at you. You're like, well,
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready.
That's why I like to teach coaches, that not work with the athletes, but that's for that reason. Because tell an athlete what I just told them, like a high level athlete, they're like, what do you mean? Like everything I'm doing is wrong? Oh fuck! And now you have the psyche of I
It's
just
terrible.
Told you that you're wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would advise that people, if you're a coach, you bleed these concepts in. But it's amazing though when you say you have a fight in 6 weeks, how your training fell more in line with exactly what we've been talking about for the last few hours, which is where's the percentages? You immediately went to like 80-20. So when something serious is about to happen, it pushes you into 80-20. I'm going to fight this guy. This guy's amazing at triangles. I need to put my time there.
Right.
Right?
But some guys don't even look at tape of their opponent.
Yeah.
They say, I'm going to do, which
Yeah.
is a respectable strategy in the sense that I'm going to impose my will and he's going to adjust to me.
Sure.
And-
You would not have thought that when you were fighting Rumina Sato.
I don't
for your
appro-
first MMA fight. For sure, you didn't think that.
No, it's a nightmare.
Did you that? You didn't think you were going to impose your will.
I knew that I had a very specific game that I had to impose,
Okay.
but I had to respect his weapons. Like you can't go in and be like, and a classic story of someone that did that was Rafael Cordero.
Okay.
He was the head trainer for Shootbox.
Yeah.
Because I had this conversation with him because he lost to Sato. He didn't look at any tape of Sato, and all of a sudden he's getting warmed up in the back room, and he looks up and he sees the highlight reel of the guy he's about to fight, and he's warming up and he's like, what the fuck? And he didn't train for him, and he lost.
So what do you think's with your experience, do you think that the one is just being hard-headed when you're saying, fuck this, I'm just going to do what I do?
No, listen, I think for some people that's a great approach, and some people have done one way. There's a guy I competed with in jiu-jitsu who used to look at tape of all the guys he was fighting and worry about that and try and then after a lot of experience competing, stopped looking at it and just did his game. Marcelo Garcia would go into Mundials as an underdog and not look at any of the legends' names that he was going up.
It's Marcelo Garcia, though, is it?
Yeah, but
You know what I mean?
so who do you model yourself after?
Would you say that the people who say I'm not going to watch tape, that's more of it might be good for them because of the mental aspect.
Yeah, because
it's for
sometimes
sure not the physical aspect.
Sometimes you look at tape and you go, fuck that. And then you get intimidated. You think, look, this guy's so good at this, or he's so good at this, or blah, blah, blah. So I think that there's merit to both approaches. It depends on the athlete. I don't think I can tell you that one is necessarily better than the other. I think it just depends.
Yeah, I mean, the example coming up would be like, well, any example. If you're a jits guy, let's say you have a jits guy who's about to fight, and you know that your guy is going up, let's say against a 10th planet black belt, right? Can you see a conceivable way where you say that you shouldn't specifically train for that? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't.
To me, for example, I have an athlete competing in a jiu-jitsu competition, and I know that there's someone that they've lost to in the past, or there's a part of their game that is going to get exploited because this person is good at it. It's hard not to look at tape and be like, listen, you suck at getting out of lasso. We have to work on that because the person you're fighting that's their specialty. So I like to look at Fight Gone Bad and take the worst case scenario or improve on the weakness, so that at the same time it also does help build the confidence of the fighter. Now they think, okay, worst case scenario, I get here, I know what to do. So even if they don't get there, you're covered. That's part of the process, aside from sharpening the tools and working on everything else.
Maybe it's a combo where the coach should be doing that job.
Yeah.
Like if you have someone who's mentally, you think they're going to get weirded out, then you should for sure look at the tape for your, right? That would make the most sense.
Sure.
I mean, there's probably no data to support it, but I think the other person you're talking about who says, I'm just going to go in and impose my will. It's almost like the outliers of the group, because they're so proficient at whatever their specialty is. Like you talk about it all the time. Oh, you know this person, he's going to throw you. He doesn't give a shit what you're going to do. He grabs you, you're getting tossed on your head, right? Or, or Hodger is going to get mount and he's going to choke you. Like, that's just going to happen. You know it's coming, and you can't shut it down. But, there's probably a lot of probative value in at least knowing what you're going up against.
I think it'd be interesting. I mean, when you post this, I think it'd be great for coaches to actually comment and say what their experience is in terms of prepping their athletes, as far as like how much tape do they watch of their opponents. Obviously in lifting, I think it's irrelevant, right? But when there's a specific adversary that has specific strengths and weaknesses, and we talk about the strengths, but there's also weaknesses. Your opponent is not very good at, defending footlocks. So, there's a few things I want to work on with you to take advantage of that.
To your point, where I think it's the coach's eye that you don't want to sort of be the filter in between the athlete.
Well, if you're fighting fucking Ryan Hall, and you're going to claim that you don't need anybody to see any tape.
Can we just not fight Ryan Hall?
Yeah.
Probably a bad
Say
idea.
that we did.
Yeah,
It's a bad idea.
Like that just seems like a bad idea to not
monster.
see what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Which apparently that's a problem. He can't get any fights. I think he just
Nobody wants to fight him. Yeah.
When are you coming back to jiu-jitsu? Can I tell a quick story about Dre?
Yes.
I saw Dre dislocate his shoulder,
Yes.
and then in jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
and then relocate it.
Yes.
And it was like watching a woman give birth. The amount of pain
Yeah.
on your face, grabbing the weight,
Yeah.
and ramming the shoulder back into its socket
Two
in
things.
the weight room.
Two things I have to point out, because you say that, and everyone in Instagram land is going to go apeshit because they're like, how can Dre get injured? And let's just slow down. When you're in jiu-jitsu, you're given the injury by your opponent. So I didn't injure my shoulder. I
don't remember how.
I had my shoulder ripped out.
Right. I don't remember who did that.
It was.
Yeah, let's not.
We won't name names. But I don't
We won't
remember
name
who did.
them.
Listen, it was that. But yeah, like I had my ACL torn for me. So don't jump on and go, oh, so you get hurt too, because nobody ever said that you're injury proof. Like no one's gonna tell me that they're not gonna get injured. Everyone gets injured. It's how much damage, how long did it take to get back? Like for example, my ACL, I was full squatting in like 3 weeks after surgery. That's what's impressive, not the injury. But getting back to your point, I want to say something.
no matter if you're a student of manual therapy, no matter what the fuck you read on how to put a shoulder back in, none of that shit works. Like fucking none. You don't remember how I did it? So I was doing the weight.
I had the weight. You remember you had the weight?
That's how I did it. Remember, I was doing the weight. Because you're supposed to do this, and then you're supposed to do all of these movements and all this fucking nonsense. The way I did it was after I did the weight and it wasn't working, I went like this. I grabbed my knee and I just went, I just like extended back. That was the only shit that put that back. But don't do it on your own. If you dislocate, don't put the joint back in by yourself. Anyway, continue your story.
Yeah, and he fucking put his shoulder, and I don't know how long I think it took. We were there for about 15.
Yeah, it was a while.
You're,
and the longer it takes, the harder
you're
it
cooling
gets.
down, and it gets
like,
worse.
Fuck. Yeah, that was brutal.
But you were in agony, and I watched that. And I'm like, he just fucking put his shoulder back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a great injury for a manual therapist.
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, you're fine.
It was fine. It was fine. What? Yeah. I forgot where we were going with this.
Joel just wanted to tell a funny story about you smashing your shoulder.
And then it brought
It's
back
like an anecdote.
horrible memories.
But I do have to teach a jiu-jitsu lunch class. So I appreciate the drawings.
Yes, now we have drawings to go by. So revmma.com.
Yeah.
If someone
If
wants-
anybody's in the GTA and they want to learn jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or boxing, or combat fitness,
I can speak.
see this handsome
or
mug.
you can see this guy. I can speak to the quality of the club for sure. It's a great place to check out, even the facility.
or for your kids as well. Obviously, our kids programs are spectacular. We have a mixed martial arts program for kids that has a lot of jiu-jitsu in it.
that actually contemplates ideas as to how to build better kids.
Yeah.
So that's
Building
another thing
better
I
little
wanna say.
building better little
Can
humans.
you get that your fight on? You can get that on YouTube, right?
Yeah, but don't watch it because I'm a lot better now. I can't look
I can
at,
also-
I can't
yeah,
look at
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
You go into a fight without striking. Like that was a
you're striking
timestamp back
now
then.
compared- you
yeah,
would've beat your
I
ass.
focused on striking for a long time.
You'd beat your ass.
Oh yeah,
Your young ass.
My young ass.
Would you beat your young ass? And can I Twitter that?
I would beat my. That sounds
Joel
bad.
Gerson, I'd beat my young ass.
I would beat my young ass.
I understand.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah, you would.
Okay, Mark. Anything else to add?
That's it.
Do you want to plug anything? Do you have any comedy dates coming up?
wow.
Yeah, I'll be at the. No.
No. All right. That's it. Thank you very much, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right.
Later.
Bye.